Alright, so today we're checking out the only channel where it's normal to hear stories about a dead ex haunting your house. It's As the Raven Dreams. That's right, I stole the intro to Gray Still Plays. Told you I was going to do another one. I hope everybody is doing great. I am doing great, I promise you that. I wanted to steal another intro because why not, right? It's always fun to do that kind of thing. Alright, so per the norm, today we are covering 5 unexplained experiences straight from Reddit, from the everyday Reddit user. Some of these stories are pretty fantastic. I love all these posts, and I hope you guys love them too. You seem to love them, so I'm going to keep doing it. If you don't love them, tell me what you don't love about them so I can do something that you do love. I am very open to suggestions and criticisms and feedback, all that stuff. So, at the risk of stretching this on as I always seem to do, let me go ahead and just say, here are 5 unexplained experiences straight from Reddit. Enjoy. Last year, I started dating a former addict. While we were dating, he relapsed and overdosed multiple times in my house, the worst of which being a very close call in my bedroom where I had to give him CPR, and he possibly had minor brain damage. I ended up getting him into rehab, and we broke up immediately after he got out. He died 3 months later. He was in a new relationship at the time, if that matters. The day before he died, I had a nightmare about him overdosing again, and it was very, very realistic. After I found out, I had more realistic dreams about just talking to him. He's told me that he doesn't know where he is, that he regrets it, and that he doesn't like that animals don't like him around anymore. I eventually told him to just stop contacting me while I was in the dream, and they've been much less frequent. The thing is, there's a strange presence in the house since this happened. My current roommate is also an ex from before I dated the ex I'm writing about, but he didn't live with me until after the breakup, and he's woken up to a figure about my ex's height standing over his bed. They used to be tense because my ex didn't like that I was still friends with my other ex, and he accused me of cheating a lot, but for the record, I never cheated on him. I see it out of the corner of my eyes sometimes. The presence isn't always negative, but it's not really positive either. I feel like I'm being watched sometimes. Sometimes it feels like someone's sitting next to me when I'm sad. Last night was the first time that something concrete actually happened. I ended up having a guy in my room. When we started making out, we heard scratching. I checked if the cat got in, but he hadn't. We went back to it, and suddenly the string lights I have hung in my bedroom were ripped down out of nowhere. There's no real explanation for why it would have happened. The guy kind of freaked out and asked if it was the cat. The cat was in the other room, and my door was closed. He knew about the situation. We've known each other for a long time, so I just straight up told him what I thought was happening. I told my ex to leave me alone out loud, and nothing else really happened. The guy helped me restring the lights, and none of the nails had fallen either, but I'm not really sure what to do now. This story is 100% true. I swear it on my life. I unfortunately cannot proclaim the experiences to be of supernatural origin, but I will tell you the story as it happened to me so you can decide for yourself. My grandmother's house was built over what we believe to be a Native American burial ground on tribal land. We know this due to its proximity to a holy mountain in a semi-rural part of Arizona, as well as numerous human skeletal remains that have been uncovered over the years from our backyard. There have been hundreds of strange occurrences in that house over the years that have been experienced by a good majority of my family, and as such, it's generally accepted, without hesitation, that the house is in fact very haunted. Uncles, cousins, grandparents, friends, everyone has had some sort of odd experience there, ranging from seeing an actual apparition to things flying off the counters at night. I lived in my grandmother's house for a few years in my early to late teens, and would often experience a whole spectrum of different odd occurrences at all times of the day. Loud explosions that nobody else heard, feelings of being watched, white figures moving across windows late at night, loud footsteps on the roof that were often heard by everybody else in the house that upon investigation could not be explained, so on and on and on. Being the natural skeptic/pessimist that I am, I would generally disregard these as my imagination or some other freak occurrence such as an attempted burglary, magnetic interference, or maybe even auditory hallucinations. Bottom line, I always had an explanation, no matter how obvious it was that I really didn't. One evening, my uncle, cousin, and I were watching Silence of the Lambs in the living room when we heard what sounded like someone choking or suffering from some sort of asthmatic attack down the hall behind us. At first, I believe only myself and my cousin heard the noise as we both looked down the hallway to where my grandparents were sleeping, in order to identify the sound's source. After it ended, we turned back around in complete silence to continue watching the movie. The noise began again. My uncle decided to pause the movie this time, and we all stared down the empty hallway to my grandparents' room. Just as my uncle was about to eject himself from his seat to walk down the hallway and investigate the sound, it began to move toward us. The sounds of someone's panicked choking moved towards the living room, circled both couches, went into the dining room, finally ended in the kitchen. In total, the experience lasted around 10 minutes or so. We all sat there in complete silence. No one spoke a word of what was happening, as there was really nothing we could say about it. At one point, I remember the sound coming from as close as 2 to 3 feet away from me, and I distinctly remember it sounding from about the height off the ground that a 5'6" to 5'8" man would stand, had there been one there. I remember looking it up and down as it was occurring, but there was nothing there. No flying insects, no animals, nothing. Absolutely nothing there. The odd part was that despite the recent death in our family, I had absolutely no recollection of ever hearing anyone in our family breathe like that. It sounded distinctly female and was accompanied by no other sound. I didn't feel cold air, I didn't feel chills. None of the typical ghost feeling stuff you read about in stories. Honestly, I didn't even feel the least bit frightened about it for whatever reason. I can only assume it was because I was so convinced that it was some sort of trickery that I didn't even consider it to be a supernatural phenomenon. Regardless of its exact origins, we all heard and experienced it that night. Oddly enough, the significance of this event really didn't start to sink in until years later. I still reach out to those that were there that night to confirm that it actually did happen, and that it wasn't some sort of elaborate prank. The user had a edit/addendum they wanted me to add into here, so here that is. This story is 10,000% true, and I often have to remind myself that it actually happened. This experience actually sent me into an intense period of extreme depression due to my views on the afterlife being totally flipped upside down. After I shared my experience with my grandmother years later, I found out that the wheezing sound we had heard that night had actually been experienced by other members of the family. One time in particular being accompanied by the apparition of an old woman staring at my uncle when he was a young man. I could literally write a book about all the odd experiences that took place in that house. For a short while after that night, the hauntings actually got worse. A few days later, a small group of us actually heard the sounds of Native American instruments being played in our front yard sometime around 1 a.m. when there was obviously nobody there. A week later, I heard what sounded like sandals slapping against the floor right in front of me. The final major occurrence during that period was when a cousin of mine, who was at that point in the middle period of a 5-year prison sentence, called my grandmother to tell her about a dream she had about a fire that killed everyone in the house. A few hours later, there was a massive fire that burned a large chunk of our dining room up. I'm not really a big believer in spreading internet BS, so I just want to say this is absolutely true. To this day, I do not have an explanation, but I'm glad that I wasn't alone in the experience, or I'd think I was totally insane. I was camping in northern Ontario along the banks of a beautiful lake. There was a dock that spanned about 20 feet over the water's surface, and the perimeter was full of brush and forest. My best friend and I were the only 2 humans present, stargazing and just talking about everything and nothing. What happened next is burnt into my memory. It lasted less than a full second, but in the midst of our conversation there was a deafening crack. All at once, the world was illuminated, as if it had suddenly become 12 in the afternoon as opposed to 12 at night. It was blinding, but each intricate detail of the wilderness around us was suddenly visible, and then darkness. The conversation halted, stiffened by the shock of what had just been experienced. Slowly, I turned to my best friend as if to silently confirm that she had just seen the same thing I had. The look on her face said it all. We both quietly retreated into our tent without speaking about what we saw until daylight the following day. I don't know if what we witnessed was some sort of supernova or if it was just a different kind of otherworldly experience, so does anyone have any insight on this? So I don't really know much about the paranormal, but I do believe in it. Essentially, something lives in my house and watches me constantly. I can just feel it. This all started around a year ago when I visited my friend who lived in a supposed haunted road in Massachusetts, Dudley Road in Billerica. Some of my friends messed with some apparent witch graves in an old graveyard, which why the hell would you even do that? I was not very pleased to say the least. We also went into a field and may or may not have seen a ghost or apparition of somebody hanged. I can get into that more in a different story, since that's not the main focus, but it's just my theory as to why this is happening. Anyway, ever since then, I believe there's been something or someone in my house. It's never done harm, but its presence isn't very welcoming to say the least. I can feel it during the day, but not as strong. But at night, I can feel someone staring into my soul. As soon as the sun sets, and especially when I'm alone, I get a pit in my stomach and feel instant terror. I've got 3 cats. When I go to sleep at night, they sleep on my bed with me. Except at random points in the night, they all wake up at the exact time, jolt up, and stare straight into the corner of my bedroom for a very long time. That corner always looks incredibly dark compared to the rest of the room, and it's always freaked me out. Sometimes when they wake up, they stare at something right next to my bed, right near my head. Coincidence or not, when I can feel this thing staring at me, it's either A, coming from the corner, or B, right next to my face. I don't know how I know it's there, but I do. I just know where it is whenever I feel it's looking at me. I would try to ignore this feeling and go to sleep anyway. However, I almost always wake up anywhere from like 1 to 3 in the morning. When I do wake up, there's a man who stands in that corner of my room and just stares into my soul. He doesn't move or speak, he just looks at me, and I look right back at him. He always looks different though. Sometimes, he looks like a classic devil. Goat legs, horns, etc. I'm sure you know what I mean by that. Sometimes, he looks like a creepy man in a pinstriped suit, but it's difficult to pinpoint his age. He looks old and wrinkly, but at the same time, he looks young and youthful, if that makes any sense. Sometimes, he wears casual clothes and a hat. All that I know is that we just stare at each other. The thing that really set me off was that a few times, without moving his body or lips, he spoke to me. Like I heard his voice in my head. I don't remember what he said, but I just listened intently. Once I saw him move from that corner to next to my bed, but he didn't walk or move his body as per usual. He was completely still and just sort of floated, but his legs still touched the ground. I'm not sure how to describe it. When that happened, I let out a little yelp and he just disappeared. The only problem with these encounters is that I have no idea if I'm awake or not. I don't know if it's a recurring dream. Every time I see him at night, it feels like I'm in a trance or like I'm hypnotized. I just feel incredibly tired. But I wake up beforehand and then go back to sleep, so that's why I'm confused. It's so real that I just believe it is. I've never experienced anything like this. I've had dreams where I wake up, like a dream within a dream, Inception kind of thing. This only happens at my house and nowhere else. The user added an edit after some of the other users left their comments. Here it is. So I've taken into account everything everyone has said. Thanks for that, by the way. I do have a salt lamp and I put it in that corner. However, I was skeptical of the sleep paralysis thing since I've never had it before. At least I don't think. And I could totally move during these events. But now I'm certain it's more. A friend of mine who was there that night at the graveyard slept over at my house the other day. He just brought up a dream about someone staring at him at night. I didn't say I experienced the same thing, but he described a figure with long arms and hair that wore a hat, and his eyes were quite large. He just looked at him the whole night. Now I'm starting to wonder if other people who were there that night ever see the same or similar things. The title of this story is, I am a respiratory therapist and I work nights in an emergency room. Hello. I've been working in this field for a few months now, and I've seen some bizarre and weird things, so I figured I'd share some of them in hopes to clear my head. I work in a decently large hospital in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. I mostly do work on the emergency room, but I've also worked around other floors of this hospital. Just the other night, a patient came in around 4 in the morning. I work nights. It was an 18-year-old female who her family found standing on the top of their shed in the middle of the night. And when her parents saw her and screamed, she fell and broke her femur. She came into the ER. I was told by her nurse to check in on her whenever she was settled in her room. So when I did, I was a little shocked that she was still in a daze and her leg was torn to shreds. I could see through the bandages. When I walked in, she just stared and didn't say a word. I was about to introduce myself when all of a sudden she lets out a scream. Not just any scream. It was a scream like an animal caught in a bear trap. After this, the nurses ran in and she started yelling out numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, but in a random order. After this, she passed out and went unresponsive. She was moved up to one of the basic care floors last time I checked. I have many more stories like this if anyone's interested. I just wanted to reach out and share my thoughts about it. Well, there you have it, my dear listener. Those are 5 unexplained experiences from Reddit. And I don't have an explanation for any of them, honestly. If you do, you can always leave it in a comment below. I'll be happy to listen to what you have to say. And maybe if the author of these stories, or any of these stories, checks the video after I send them the link, they can, discuss with you as well. I'm always willing to encourage open discussions, right? So if you did enjoy this, please do consider giving it a thumbs up. That helps the channel a lot. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel. That tells me you're interested in the stuff I do and that you like it, and it encourages me to keep going. As previously stated, feel free to leave a comment. I would love to hear from you, and I try to respond to everybody. All stories are sourced in the video description below. Please check those out if you want to. Also, there are some various links for my social media pages down there: Reddit, Twitter, Facebook. Just, you can stalk me all over the planet if you want. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed those, and if you did, let me know, like I said. But until next time, sleep well.